Welcome to CanHammer, everybody. Tonight's special episode on chess clocks. Welcome to CanHammer, everybody, your source for 40K from the Great White North. Tonight I have a special episode on chess clocks. If you go anywhere near 40K tournaments, since years, I guess, you will have noticed that slowly, tournament by tournament, the problem of slow playing is prevalent. It was in 7th, it was probably before that, even though I didn't play before that, and it is still in 8th. And it is slowly bubbling and boiling under the surface of tournament and competitive play for some time, and maybe has finally hit its head or hit the boiling point right now in 8th. Probably since 8th is so much more of a horde edition than 7th was, but despite the game being being simplified, there's still a lot of rules, and now you have armies doing 200, 300 models, and it's just not doable for a lot of players. And I know there'll be people out there who just say, "Oh, get good, hashtag get good." But, you know, that's not a very helpful thing to say. And so one of the solutions that have been bandied about for a long time has been to use chess clocks. And that has slowly started to become used. I know that the Berry Bash used it in its top tables. People are starting to experiment with it in their own sort of casual games. And it's becoming more and more of a thing that might become a regular thing. ITC has published sort of draft or I guess chess clock use guidelines for their tournaments, and this includes, you know, how to use them, when does it start, when do you pass it back and forth, and what happens when you run out of time. So I think it's only a matter of time before it becomes much more prevalent. In terms of CanHammer tournaments, we are seriously considering or have decided to use chess clocks in some form, maybe just on the top tables, or maybe everyone, unless both players decide not to. At the end of the day, people are concerned. So the benefits of chess clock are clear. It divides the 2.5-hour game into 1.25 hours per person, and if you use all your time, then sorry, your game is done, basically. And that is the quote-unquote fairest way of making sure each player gets equal time, whether you're playing a 10 model army or a 500 model army. And sure, so on the very basic nature of just splitting time, that is the best way to go. Now, it's not necessarily true that you have to split it down the middle, to be honest, but if you want it, armies notwithstanding, player skill notwithstanding, you know, the truest way of making it completely fair is just split the time down the middle. Now, for most games that do finish, the players haven't spent equal amount of time, and that's just the variation in player skill, player speed, and player army. But for the purposes of this argument, we're going to say it's the fairest way. You take half, I take half the time. Opponents of chess clocks will point out that there are other things you could do to speed up the game. You could lower the point values. I argue that lowering the point value changes the game, and I'm an opponent of playing lower point values. The game is being designed around 2,000 points at a match play level, so might as well play it that way. Other things you could do is longer rounds. Sure, but if you're playing 4 rounds on one day, you're already playing to 8:30, 9 o'clock. That's a really long day. So probably not super feasible unless you're going to drag your tournaments out to 3 days or something like that, which you probably lower attendance. And then the other opponents, and I believe this somewhat, at least for now, is that making everyone use clocks is going to deter the non-super competitive player. especially if they have to bring their own. But even to some extent, if you rock up of a tournament, you're just there to have fun, and somebody pops up on you and forces you to use a clock, that's going to put you off the game, especially if you haven't practiced with one, and that may mean you don't come back to that tournament. And the last thing we need is for people not to come to tournaments, especially as the game is growing in such popularity. We don't want to service the 10%, 15% of the ultra competitive population just to piss off 50, 60% of the other people. That's my only concern about clocks. I guess we'll see. We'll see what happens over time as it becomes more and more prevalent. And yeah, so what I've done here is, I don't know anything about chess clocks. I don't play chess, and I've never used chess clocks. So what I did was I got a hold of a couple of chess clocks. Number one is the Leap digital chess timer right here. This is off Amazon for 30 bucks Canadian, and this is one sort of probably the cheapest chess clock you can buy legitimately. And then this is a DJT North American digital chess clock, professional chess clock, and this was 80 bucks off Amazon. So this is more than double that, but this is still cheap. For the purpose of this experiment, I didn't go and buy one of the professional metal ones that are like $300 to $400. That's a little bit crazy. These are the I just got one that is twice as expensive as the other one, just for comparison. And let's check it out. So this one is made in China, and this one is obviously made in the USA. No, it's actually Dutch. Yeah, it's made in the Netherlands, but it's completely labeled with American propaganda. Okay, so this made in China one's pretty straightforward. You get this, you get the instruction booklet here, which is in multiple languages. The actual instructions themselves are 3 or 4 pages, and if you read through them, you have to read it 3 or 4 times, and you may still not understand it because it's fairly broken English. And yeah. And inside you get a little wipe cloth, which is cool for wiping your LCD screen. Probably unnecessary. You don't get any batteries, of course. It takes one AA battery, and it has the little on-off switch at the bottom. And here it is. So you have your button, and so what you do is when you switch it on, you dial up your rounds. I already set this. It's fairly easy to do. And then you press the start button, and then whichever side is up, that's the player who's active. The time is counting down, and when he's passing it, press it over, and the other one starts to count down. So on and so on. And this one is convenient in that it shows hours, minutes, and seconds right up there in one screen. Now, this is fairly cheap plastic. Given that it's made in China, it's not likely going to last very long, or if you drop it, it may well bust. But it's only 30 bucks, and it would definitely do you for a 30K tournament. Now, let's have a look at the other one. This is the DJT North American Professional Chess Clock. This was 80 bucks. You open this baby up, and all you get is the chess clock and the instruction booklet. Now, this is bigger than the other one. You can see already that it's probably about, 15-20% bigger, wider. It is also still made of plastic. It feels a little bit more hefty, but it is still nonetheless made of plastic. You really need to go up to $200, $300 if you want a metal one. This has an on and off button at the bottom, which I don't like as much as the switch, but the button's easier to press by accident, especially when you're handling it. But basically, all right. Okay, so once you set this one, as I said earlier, here you get the hour and the minutes, but you don't get the seconds. You don't really need the seconds. It starts to count seconds as once you get to 20 minutes, and you can change that setting. The instruction booklet for this is in 3 languages, and it is much more detailed. There are maybe 30 different modes and multiple settings for each mode that you can adjust with this. You can see there's 4 buttons along the front, and has alarms and audible alarms and all sorts of things. So this is a much more complex and accomplished clock. For the purpose of Warhammer 40K, it's really the same. You set your time and then you press play, and then it goes, and you see, so there's no seconds there, and then when you pass it over, it goes, and it just counts down the minutes till you get to 20 minutes, then it counts, shifts over and counts the seconds. And that's it. Fairly easy to use, and these are the 2 clocks. So you can see here that there's not a lot of difference between $30 and $80. Certainly anybody who complains about buying a $30 clock or an $80 clock to play in a tournament is probably just being silly, considering how much money they've spent on their models and paints and foam bags and dice, and just consider another accessory in order to play a competitive 40K. That's how I would ask people to consider it. So I guess we're going to see what happens with chess clocks in the competitive tournament scene. But this was just a short little review of a couple of different chess clocks you can find for pretty cheap off Amazon or any other appropriate store. So I hope everybody enjoyed that, and we'll catch you next time.